Hello and welcome to the Oregon Business Matters podcast, brought to you by Oregon Business and Industry, Oregon's statewide Chamber of Commerce. At Oregon Business Matters, we focus on insights, issues, and initiatives that impact Oregonians' shared prosperity and the state's economic health. I'm Angela Wilhelms, President and CEO of OBI, and your host here at Oregon Business Matters. Today, I'll be talking with Patrick Nofield, Chairman and co-founder of Escape Lodging. Based in Cannon Beach, Escape Lodging owns and operates hotels and restaurants on the Oregon coast, in the Columbia River Gorge, and in the Willamette Valley. Escape has also developed properties in Pasco and Richland, Washington. In addition to running Escape Lodging, Patrick serves as board chair for the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, which advocates for the hospitality industry in Oregon and is a great partner of OBI's. We were interested in featuring the hospitality industry in an episode as we get into the heat, no pun intended, of summer activity, a time when many are, in fact, thinking of escaping to the coast or to wine country. So, Patrick, thank you for taking the time to talk to me during what must be a very busy time of the year for you.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. I look forward to our conversation.
Great. Well, just to get started, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Escape Lodging? When and how did you create the business? How has it evolved over the years? Just, when you tell the Escape story, how does that go?
Thank you. Yes, so Escape Lodging started out of a company called Steve Martin Management Company. I met my future business partner, Tom Drumhiller, at the time in 1987. We both worked for Steve Martin. Steve Martin developed the Stephanie Inn, one of the iconic hotels in the Northwest, as well as the Surf Sand Resort and many other properties. And they started out as a rooms division manager and met Tom in 87. And then we eventually became president and executive vice president of Steve's company as he started to settle back a little bit. In 1999, we went ahead and took a plunge and decided to build our first property. We were still employed by Steve Martin Management, but at the time, we had ambitions of our own, and the Martin family supported our efforts to build what is now the Inn at Cannon Beach, located on the south end of Cannon Beach.
That's wonderful. I've been there and I like it. Good work.
Yeah. One of the things we took from Steve was, in fact, I'll tell you a quick story. When I first went to work for Steve, out of college, he took me to his house overlooking the ocean. And I remember he had a Lincoln Continental and a Ford Bronco. And inside he had, at the time, a Bang & Olufsen stereo system, just phenomenal acoustics. And I thought, wow, this is great. And we're sitting at his desk in his home office. And he says, Patrick, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And I said, well, Steve, I want to be rich. And he looked at me and he said, son, no, you got it all wrong. He goes, Patrick, take care of people. The money takes care of itself. We're here to serve. Patrick, the money we make is a report card on how well we serve others. I was 23 at the time. I really was like, whatever, but I think what he intended to say was, if we have purpose in our vocation, it's not a job anymore. And so I think that's one of the things that transcended Escape Lodging was a focus on relationships, not just transactions. Focus on relationships with our guests and our employees and of course our communities, the communities where we're engaged. And I think it really helps. I think we've achieved that. Angela, one of the things that I'm most proud of is our guest service scores. Our TripAdvisor and our Google review scores for our coastal properties, the Ocean Lodge and the Inn at Cannon Beach primarily, they're number 1 and number 2 out of 360 hotels on the Oregon coast, number 2 and number 6 in the state of Oregon through TripAdvisor. Our Marriott hotels right now, all 3 of our Marriott hotels are the top 3 guest service scores in the whole Marriott network for the state of Oregon. Wow. And that doesn't happen just by building a hotel. It's about investing in people that sincerely care about their guests and want to exceed their expectations.
Well, and I think, that's wonderful to hear as somebody who's on the customer end of hotels in Oregon. And you wouldn't know this, but I have stayed at some of your properties and I think that rings true. I've had wonderful experiences, but what strikes me in that is not just the focus you have on the people that are coming as customers, but you must also care very deeply and spend a lot of time thinking about how to support the people who work for you in those facilities and in your organization so that they have that shared sense of vocation and purpose. And can you talk about that for just a second? Because it strikes me as being a
Sure.
fundamental piece of your success as well.
Yeah, it does. Steve always made sure that Tom and I were focused on engaging employees and appreciating employees. And we do an annual review process pretty much like most people do. But one of the things we focus on to core is a self-appraisal and a focused understanding what the employee's goals and objectives are, not just within the framework of their job, but also on a personal level. The relationship piece is getting to know the employee, getting to know their backstory, and you can't fake it. It's got to be sincere. Angela, there's a story I'd like to share about an employee that we were doing a review on back in the late 90s. His name was Andy Nichols, and he was a restaurant manager at our restaurant in the Dalles called Cousins, and a very great restaurant manager, great people skills, but his passion was glass art. And through the peer review process, the self-appraisal, Andy shared, he wanted to build his own studio. And so Tom and I decided we would pay him a 6-month salary for him to go out and develop his own business, create his studio. And he's been very successful with it. In fact, when we built our Ocean Lodge in 2002, he sold us a 400 glass blown sea thematic chandelier that's probably worth $80,000. He sold it to us for 1,500, so it paid back numerous times.
Wow. I mean, what beautiful work and talent, and good for your employees to feel like they can share with you what they want to do, and good for you for recognizing that. I'm having in my head a little loop of the Lion King Circle of Life song, since you got that type of mentorship when you were younger. The fact that you guys are carrying that forward is a true testament to how you think about your business. Um, let's talk a little bit more about the business. I just have some curiosity questions. For example, you recently opened a hotel in Newburgh, and you're soon to open a hotel in Dayton. How do you think about where to open new properties and expand?
Now, that's a really good question. Um, we typically look for barrier to entry markets or markets that are underserved. And our focus probably the last 3 years has been Yamhill County, Willamette Valley. We still think the wine tourism is a significant market for us. And Newburgh specifically, we consider that a tertiary market. And when we decide to brand something like a Marriott hotel, we really look for those markets that are underserved, because what we find is it draws a whole new market to those communities. Marriott specifically, for their Bonvoy brand loyalty program, we opened our first Marriott hotel in 2014 in the Dalles, and we have an existing hotel there. We were concerned we were going to cannibalize the market, cannibalize that hotel. But what we found was we added 6 or 8%
Hmm,
new market penetration just because of the Marriott brand.
that's interesting, that symbiosis of their loyalty, because I think some might find it counterintuitive to opt to open under another brand as opposed to have your own brand. But you're right. If you can reap the benefits of that loyalty and expand overall, that's great. What one of the other things you mentioned is you've mentioned both hotels and at least one restaurant in this conversation so far, and some people are going to think of those as very different businesses. Obviously, they're both hospitality related, but what in your mind makes those complement each other, and what challenges exist in the fact that you are running two different business lines?
Yeah, that's very interesting, especially in this current climate. We've always looked at the restaurant business primarily as an amenity to the lodging component. People like to social gather, people like to enjoy a good meal. And typically, when the lodging is there, they're always looking for that place to get away to and enjoy. And so we do it, but it's been hard, to be honest with you. The cost of goods, specifically in the restaurant, the cost of labor makes those margins harder and harder to sustain. And we're seeing it, and we're seeing it heck, we're seeing it nationwide.
Hmm.
So, I love to eat at restaurants. My business partner, Tom, who passed away in 2017, he loved them. He loved the social component. He was very social and enjoyed those relationships. But to me, they're tough. And I say the hardest job in hospitality is a good restaurant manager, for what they have to go through, what they have to achieve. And the burden placed on them is significant.
No, that's interesting. That's one challenge that you face is just the difficulty of running that particular line. And you mentioned a few challenges within that, cost of goods, the workload and work put onto the employees. I imagine that's probably something that in your hat as the chair of the Restaurant and Lodging Association, you spend some time informing policymakers about. But what other challenges or what other just things, challenging or not, about your business and industry do you wish more people understood or knew about what it is that you do?
Well, I think it applies to, at least in Oregon, all businesses, especially a number of your members at OBI, government legislation, overreach, government regulatory environment that creates additional obstacles for business to thrive and sustain themselves. And we're dealing with an issue, which I'm sure you're familiar with. In fact, you've been very supportive of, is this House Bill 3962, which is essentially trying to take restricted transient lodging tax dollars that are dedicated to tourism and marketing and make them available for community infrastructure projects and public safety. Well, every community we're in, for the most part, I can see they're going to think this is a great opportunity for us to, fill our general fund coffers. But what a lot of them don't understand is, boy, if we don't have marketing for transient lodging tax dollars, there's a potential those lodging tax dollars might dry up, and it could happen. And so I think people don't may not understand how important it is to educate people that make decisions in government on a local level, on a regional level, on a state level.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a event in early June where we focused on sports tourism and the benefits in the economy of that sporting events, whether youth tournaments or college activities or professional events, or signature one-off events can provide in a community. I'm sitting in Salem recording this, and we've got the annual Ironman competition that brings hotel nights. And one of the panelists was from Medford and talked about what they can do in Southern Oregon with hotel rooms for youth sports. And obviously, Portland's got the pro teams. And it strikes me as that sometimes people miss that connectivity that, you can be talking about the sports and recreation industry, but what you're also talking about is the hospitality industry, is the tourism industry, is the folks coming to eat at restaurants, and that, again, that sort of interdependent ecosystem that's created. And when you start to do things that maybe seem small or going after one thing, like the promotional dollars to help bring in more tourism, you're not just affecting that fund. You're affecting those businesses and then the circles of businesses, you know, that are interrelated. So sorry, I'm supposed to be
No, no,
interviewing you, but I couldn't help myself.
no, no. Hey, that was a perfect segue because um, the economic impact of a tourist in a community, people don't understand it. And I have a perfect example. Some years ago, we had a guest staying at the Surf Sand Resort when I worked for Steve Martin, and we inadvertently charged their credit card an extra night. And they called and said, "Hey, you guys took advantage of an opportunity." I said, "No, I'm sorry. Please send me a copy of your statement, and we'll refund it right away." So they sent me a statement of a 3-day stay in Cannon Beach, or 2-day actually. But on that statement, there was another $1,700 in expenses to restaurants, to a clothing boutique, to the library. People don't really understand how significant that one person or family on that trip creates for the community. So I think it segues perfectly to what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of reasons people might come to Oregon, um, and the scenery obviously is one of them, the location, but it's also the could be an event or a conference or a meeting or visiting family or whatever. But the fact that they're coming here is a boon. Oh, on that note, I want to ask a question, and I hate to even ask it. And we're not directly adjacent to Canada. There's, that state that sits in between us. But I have to think that some of your business comes from our friends to the north. Have recent tensions between Canada and the U.S. affected business? We hear about this a lot, but I have you here and wanted to ask directly.
Of course it does. And I think especially in the leisure markets on the coast here in Cannon Beach and Seaside, it's approximately 15% of our gross business. So it
Wow.
is a significant amount.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
our first quarter, all throughout the state, but primarily on the coast, was very soft. It's funny, I saw some Canadian tourists last weekend in Cannon Beach, and they were getting out of their truck, and I said, hello, thank you for coming to Cannon Beach. I was so excited to see them, and they were great. I mean, they were fine. But I do see there is that concern. There is some animosity, and I not even the Canadians, just consumer uncertainty. I look at the 401ks, what happened a month and a half ago with these tariff announcements. And, from my perspective, we like to be strategic. And I would hope that the governments would be strategic as well and not be, it's perceived to be scattershot sometimes, the way, and then the markets react accordingly. And then I think that leads again to consumer confidence index being one of the lowest it's been in 12 years. It leads to this uncertainty that should we take that trip really, or should we just, keep our savings because we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope for all of our sakes that is something we can get over soon. Because as we mentioned, we're heading into, the hot months here in Oregon, time when a lot of Oregonians don't leave but stay because it's so magical here in the summer, late summer and early fall. So I've got to think that it's a busy time. I would love to hear your thoughts about, how you ramp up for the summer, how you think about seasonal, an industry that's so seasonal, and how you prepare for that, and what you're expecting this summer, frankly.
Well, it's interesting. When I first moved here in the late 80s, Cannon Beach, you could shoot a cannon down Main Street after Labor Day weekend. I mean, it was dead. But now we've seen it expand. I think through the state level marketing of tourism, from the local regional levels marketing tourism, we really are strong pretty much from, let's say, spring break in March through about the third week of October anymore. And then weekends primarily year round anymore. So it's really expanded. But to that end, I think that the challenge that a lot of our businesses have is attracting and retaining quality employees. And I think that that's been our focus. We try to keep people employed through the wintertime. We look at doing capital projects during those times, and we ask anybody who wants to stay involved and continue to get hours if that's an opportunity for them.
Yeah, that's great. That makes sense. Some way to smooth sort of that otherwise seasonal or the peaks and valleys throughout the year. That's brilliant. Well, we are running out of time. We've promised everyone a relatively short form podcast, and I'm guilty of wanting to talk to folks like you forever. But we do eventually have to close it out. But before I give you a chance to say any parting thoughts, I've got to ask, you operate hotels and restaurants in some of the most beautiful parts of the state, but everybody needs to get away sometimes. So where do you like to travel when you have time?
We have a beautiful home on the ocean front here in Cannon Beach, but it's work. And where I find my respite is Mount Hood. I've been going there since I was a young kid. Lisa and I were fortunate enough about 7 years ago to buy a beautiful home on the Sandy River with Bureau of Land Management land behind us. And I swear, I drive down this lane and my shoulders go soft. And it's funny, Angela, when I was there during COVID, I went up there because I came down with COVID in April of 20. And Lisa calls me and she goes, well, when are you going to come home? You've been there 10 days. And I said, well, I'm still testing positive. I don't know. I didn't want to go home. I love it up there so much.
You're like, I'm sorry, I think my cell phone is breaking up a little bit.
Well, that's the cell phone doesn't work up there. That's what's another
Well,
beauty.
there you go. Well, I love the way you described that, because that feeling of your shoulders kind of softening, I think we all know that when you instinctively can take a breath. I mean, that's my reaction when I come across the hill driving to the coast and first see, the Pacific Ocean. That's immediately what happens. And so I think it's great that you have your own place, that's still relatively close, and that allows you to get away as well. So that's great to hear. Well, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners before we sign off, Patrick?
Yeah. Well, one thing that's on my mind is we've gone through significant strategic planning over the last 5 years. And through that, we've created a purpose of hospitality with courage and character. And the reason I think it's important is through that, we created core values, passion, family, fun, relationship, and heart. And going through tough times, when we are figuring out what direction to go, specifically, a good example was the pandemic. We were mandated to have all Cannon Beach seaside properties shut down by the government. Yet we're just coming out of the winter time. Spring break was on the hills. We were looking for a capital infusion. Instead, we're getting calls from guests asking for advance deposits back. And again, having those core values at the time, what's most important, really helped drive us in a direction that pulled us through it. And we use them all the time. So anybody that's listening, take advantage of the opportunity to review your purpose, why we're here, why we're doing, the importance of your mission, and your core value.
Yeah, can you repeat those values again? I thought they were wonderful.
Yeah, Escape Lodging's core values are passion, family, fun, relationship, and heart.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I would also encourage listeners, if you're not sure what you're going to do for a particular weekend over the summer, or maybe you had to unfortunately cancel a larger trip elsewhere, you are in good hands, because you've got lots of places you can go to in our beautiful state of Oregon for a little R&R over the summer or the fall. And my favorite time at the coast actually is the winter with some of the storms. So we encourage everyone to take a look. I think escapelodging.com, that's your website, correct?
Yeah. Yes, Angela. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for your time today. We could probably go on for a while, so maybe we'll just have to invite you back at the end of the year to see how it went. But thank you, listeners, for tuning in. The Oregon Business Matters podcast is a production of Oregon Business and Industry, Oregon's statewide Chamber of Commerce, and our episodes can be found on all the top podcast platforms. For more information about Escape Lodging, visit escapelodging.com. And for more info about OBI, visit OregonBusinessIndustry.com. Thank you very much.